Hey guys, endgame highlights from Speed Chess Championship consolation match between Hans Niemann and Hikaru Nakamura, 5+1 time control.
Queen to g4. So for Hans, he needs to be careful at this stage of the game, and that's why he's in for a bit of a think.
Yeah, I mean, queen g4, it isn't really a direct threat because the knight can drop back to f6, but you start getting a little bit uneasy when you face Hikaru. I mean, something like knight d7 could be in the air, deflecting the queen, then recapturing on e4, and really putting pressure on the bishop on d5. Wait a second, the eval bar hated that move, and bishop takes e4, Robert, followed by rook to d7 and queen to g4?
Yeah, these moves actually are free-flowing. So this for Hikaru should be quite a natural find. And you see him look, there it is. There's the Hikaru staring at the ceiling.
And to the side right there at the what?
Oh, he knows something is up here. He doesn't believe in queen to b7. And you know, it looks nice, right? You're lining your queen and bishop up, but you have to look for these tactics. And Donnie, we have to admit, bishop takes knight, giving up your fianchetto bishop. It's not a typical plan. We usually don't advise it, but here it works tactically.
I've seen entire chapters of old Soviet chess books written on these unconventional moves, invisible chess moves that you don't look at because they're so unnatural. Why would you weaken your light squares like that? Well, tactics always supersede general principles, positional considerations, and Hikaru, you know he smells a rat because he doesn't just take a minute and a half for no reason. He's, I think, trying to find a follow-up. Once rook d7, queen c8 happens, I'm not necessarily convinced queen g4 is the most accurate move. Maybe there's like a sack on f7, but let's wait for him to decide on bishop takes e4. Robert, maybe knight d7 is also catching his eye?
No, bishop takes e4, rook d7. He goes b4 first. So there's clearly tactics in the air. The position's still good for white. So there are these lines that are happening with queen g4, whether Hans likes it or not. This is just a temporary sacrifice to maybe distract that bishop, put on a loose square.
And I feel like a kid in a candy store or a soda store. I was like, do I get the root beer? Do I get the Sprite? I mean, there's so many pieces hanging. He's trying to force this bishop onto an undefended square. Then he might play bishop takes e4. And then there's an amateur chess player who wants to replace me in the commentator's booth. This is unacceptable. Magnus Carlsen, ladies and gentlemen.
Wow. Okay, well, we just started the match, and we already have our first surprise. First, on the board, and now off. We're going to be joined by Magnus here. We see the crowd. Come on, another louder round of applause for Magnus. This is your reigning Speed Chess champion, your 2024 Speed Chess Championship finalist. He will be playing against Alireza Firouzja tomorrow, but now he has the displeasure of joining me here in the booth. So as we, live TV, as Danny likes to say, we're going to replace Danya for a sec. Here we go. Magnus, welcome, welcome. Sorry, we'll hook you up here. All live, all fresh. So, yeah, that way. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hey, Magnus, welcome, welcome. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling really good. Well, it does make sense. Okay, G4 is horrible. No, but he needed, I mean, G4 rook G5 was just winning.
Yeah.
Now but Hikaru has no time. So I said G4 was horrible, but that was based on like evaluating the move from an objective basis. If you're thinking about just making a move that your opponent hasn't considered with no time, then it's maybe not that bad.
Are you good at that? Can you sort of forget the objective evaluation to play on your opponent's time, or do you always feel like you're looking for the best move?
I can definitely be practical, but it's not what's natural for me. I usually try and be quite objective. And see here, he's setting little traps. That was rook c8 followed by knight d6 fork if he had taken the pawn on g4. But yeah, now this is just going to be a draw.
Okay, well, right now it's Hans.
Rook g7 clinches it.
Oh, yeah, if he finds that with the fork, and Hans doesn't miss that. So we have a draw in game two. It's still a 1-point lead for Hikaru. But, Hans, he's fighting it.
Two moves have been way too passive.
And I guess for Hans, he does have a lead on the clock. Do you feel like he's not using the time that he has in those moments, or is it just Hikaru being Hikaru?
I think it's a little bit of both. I love the way Hikaru has coordinated his pieces on the last few moves, and okay, now this I think is heading towards a draw because you got ba6. Unless bishop c6 is somehow decisive, which I don't see.
Wow.
Now this is... okay, I'll take back the draw part, obviously. Like, this is now completely unclear.
There are pins everywhere, right? The rook is pinned.
I was just going to say, is a7 the move? But I don't see anything after queen a7.
I mean, it looks threatening, and I guess this is a question of it's a bullet scramble now. So
yeah, and also like the queen is coming to h8.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, exactly. Now the queen lands on h8. Well, he didn't see it.
But Hans.
Maybe it didn't work. Who knows?
Oh, barely getting moves off these two. The king goes to g2, and
yeah, no. Oh, queen a1.
Oh, that's a free queen.
Okay, yeah.
I don't think we need your expertise at this point, but Hikaru Nakamura does win the third game. Just going right for the back rank. Is there some kind of take on f? No, the bishop takes f2.
Yeah, bishop takes f2, just king f1. And in these positions, having a couple or even 3 pawns for the exchange is usually not enough because the rooks are incredibly powerful.
That black king is just hunted, as you called exactly the direction this game was going. And this is huge for Hans because if things didn't go this way and he was trailing by 3 points, I think we would say that he's really in trouble. But he needs to convert this still. He doesn't have much time.
No, but I don't... I like this. He's forcing knight h4. He's probably going to go queen e2. And again, like, we have material equality and it's +4 for white. So that's... Okay, he's just going to trap the knight, but anything was winning there. Yeah, g3, king h3, game over. Last... funny is the last trick to hope for... to hope for some rook d3, but even that doesn't work because white doubles on the 8th rank and checkmates. But yeah, this is agony now for Hikaru, and he resigns. So
not much agony. It's over.
Yeah, we got ourselves a match.
We do indeed. It's 2.5, 1.5 in Hikaru Nakamura's favor.
Further, he doesn't have the time for it. He drops the knight back to f6. Nope, that is not a move, which we are going to see. Knight to f4 by Hikaru. Rook takes c1 is the blue arrow. What is the significance of this move, Robert? Why does the rook trade help black so much? Is it because of bishop a7 here? No, queen b6, and he found it.
Wow, queen b6 was not a move that immediately came to mind, but it makes perfect sense because not only are you threatening to win a piece, the d4 pawn's pinned, but you're threatening to win a pawn if the king moved out the way. So right now, the engine says that's an even position. I don't actually fully believe that. I do think it's slightly easier for white to play for the moment, but that bishop can take on f4 now, the bishop on b8. So Hikaru backs up, and suddenly it's Hans with the upper hand.
Ooh, and the coherence of Hans's defensive play here has been really impressive. b4, a5, he's really doing everything he can to improve this light-squared bishop. He's actually improving both of his bishops, and he's actually seizing the initiative. I'm still worried that he's down 20 seconds. The clock keeps sliding down. But now Hikaru is going to invest some time. He's not sure how he can improve his position. Maybe the knight can come back to f4. Then he has to worry about a trade and a rook infiltration. He goes rook d1, kind of clamming up, adopting a defensive posture. Now it's Hans who's pressing the buttons.
And sometimes the best offense is a good defense. And knight c1, knight d3, just regrouping, getting the knight to more active territory.
Knight.
It doesn't look pleasant for white. But what is black's plan? That's the annoying thing about the sudden. Black's down to 23 seconds, and you want to find like a real punch. But for now, Hikaru's holding everything together. Rook e1, an only move to keep this status quo. But this is chaos ensuing on this board.
It absolutely is. Hans down under 20 seconds. He's played this move f4, trying to induce weaknesses on the king side. G takes f4 is possible. Instead, Hikaru goes g4, drying up the king side, trying to leave this pawn as a long-term target. Maybe the bishop can slide back to f1 to clear the way for white's knight to jump into d3. f4 is going to become a target. Once again, I'm liking white's position despite the eval bar. Let's see what happens here. Seatbelts fastened, folks.
And that bishop on b2 is weak, but so is the bishop on b8. Just not really any open territory for those, but the control of the e-file is the utmost importance, and so is the clock. Hans down to 6 seconds. He's trying to pry open the king side to go after the king on g2, but black's best move might be queen jumping over knight to h4. That's what you need to do. That's not happening.
Queen d8 to h4 would change this game because that g3 square is juicy. Pieces getting traded. Hikaru trades off the last pair of rooks. He could play queen e1, but I think he wants the queens on the board. It might be black's king that's weaker than white's. Hikaru drops the pawn, but the game's not over. If the queens get traded, the knight might be stronger than the bishop. I'm also worried about these pawns being locked on dark squares, Robert. Who's playing for a win here?
I think both players in a way are, but I'm looking at Hans. F takes G4, outside pass pawn potential.
And now H4 undermining the pawn. Hikaru's going to have 2 pass pawns. All of Black's pawns are on dark squares. Hikaru should now win this. G6 is coming. A check on B2, forcing the king away. And after G6, I think Hans is busto.
Wow, bishop B2 check was a lovely move there. Hikaru Nakamura wins game 5. Hans resigns, but wow, that was a really close game.
Yet, because that rook from F8 could have gotten involved. Hans still keeping everything under control other than his clock. He's down to 6 seconds. He's up a pawn. Will we see Hikaru take it, or will he use this as an umbrella to basically keep his king away from any possible checks?
There's no rush to take it. I guess Black could play bishop F5 at some point to protect it, but the bishop
stopped raining five hours ago. No umbrella necessary.
Gosh. Oh, but look at this. It's another umbrella. That king is safe on D4, and even though Black is up a pawn, Black is losing because White is far more active.
And finally, Hikaru finds a way to break through. The A6 pawn might be the deciding factor here. After all, the C6 pawn is long gone. Finally, you can gang up on that pawn. You can take it right now. You could bring the other rook to the 6th rank. The patience has been really impressive here, but one last bit of accuracy required. Hans desperately trying to get active.
Well, rook F6 check forces the king to G file. King E7 gets mated.
Oh.
Rook C to E6. That would be a pretty nasty checkmate to see on the board. And otherwise, I feel like Hikaru has a choice. Does he move the rook first? Does he move his knight? He goes back to H3. There's no H6, so G5 is dropping.
That knight it needs to be paid overtime. It could have gone back to F2 if necessary. Now you can go up to G5, back to F4. Now it's a perfect outpost. Take that pawn already, Hikaru.
You can take it. Knight E6 is the threat.
And if rook C4, king takes D5.
You've been doing your puzzle rush. I saw you doing that before the show. Is that will he find the follow-up? Because this looks, I mean, like Black is about to hold, but there could be some bishop F7 with BG7 mate coming and knight F5 bringing more firepower into the action. This is just not easy to go forward. Let's go to the live game.
Yes.
If we can.
And he's found both of these moves.
I mean, Hans, when he is in the flow, he is such an incredible player.
And bishop F5, this is the double exclam move. The computer's wrong. Because if he had taken on G6 immediately, in this very position, the black queen would have been on E6 instead of on D6, and you wouldn't have had the ability to jump the knight into the attack with tempo. This is what Grandmaster level attacking chess boils down to, Robert. And he found knight F5. Can he find the finishing touch? That cherry on top of the Shirley Temple. What is it? How do you finish this? Rook E1?
This is exactly where, when you see the engine, it can be misleading. Because it says +5. It looks like White's winning. It's sky high. But then you have to find the knockout. Rook E1 looks like a great move. Bring that last piece into the attack. As you're pointing out, knight E7, move the bishop away from G6. Get a knight to G6. But you start seeing ghosts sometimes in these positions, like Rook D7. You're covering the 7th rank. And he plays knight E7, and the engine doesn't like it.
And queen E5. This is what Hans is so attracted by. But that bishop on A7, I pointed out a long time ago, it has lain dormant for so long. Is it time for it to join the defense? It does slice off the rook on A8. Maybe Hikaru can take on E7. That looks way too terrifying. It helps White's rook getting. He does play bishop E8. Oh, queen F6.
Oh, that deserves a triple exclam.
A queen sacrifice, a deflection, and a back rank mate. And it was important that he sliced off the rook.
Wow, that was a sick game from Hans Niemann.
Knight for White.
Wow, this is Hikaru Nakamura struggling under the duress of time trouble. Bishop G1, Rook H2, checkmate.
What do you do?
Is the threat, and here it comes. Bishop G1. You have to play G4, I guess, just to survive.
HG and Bishop H2 is mate.
He resigns. So Hikaru Nakamura resigns. Hans Niemann now has risk that much on the board, but his clock is doing him no favors. If there's tension that remains here, he could find himself in trouble. But Hikaru, he's a 4-time bullet chess champion for a reason.
Man, that would be such a big save for Hikaru. We said a win would propel him forward, but if you're losing, you save a game, you keep the lead, you like your chances. This is suddenly getting sharp again as the rook keeps harassing the black king, now gets behind the black pawn. Is Hans now going to play for Hikaru's clock? Can he take on D3 and try to get to D2?
Uh-oh, that's not going to be good for White. F2 falls, you're in big trouble here, but he allows it, so it's still equal apparently, but this is starting to look really bad for White.
He's going to lose F2, likely with check. Hans doesn't even rush to take it. The king has to hide on H3. Could get mated there with a bishop on G1. Bishop takes F2, hits the bishop on D5, and might be knight for White.
Wow, this is Hikaru Nakamura struggling under the duress of time trouble. Bishop G1, Rook H2, checkmate.
What do you do?
Is the threat, and here it comes. Bishop G1. You have to play G4, I guess, just to survive.
HG and Bishop H2 is mate.
He resigns. So Hikaru Nakamura resigns. Hans Niemann. This is there are done in B6 thing, but the E4 pawn and the square is also vulnerable.
But if you had taken B6, you would have allowed Rook B8. Hikaru allows the trade, but it doesn't change the character of the position because e5 is coming. Maybe even he takes f5, forces a winning pawn endgame. I think it does because you will have g4 at the end of the line. Kind of a little sloppy there by Hikaru, and he keeps missing the forced wins. Hans sacks another pawn to get the e5 square and make it difficult for Hikaru to win via a breakthrough. And Hikaru slows down.
I think Hikaru wins by a tempo here, and that's why he has slowed down. Because f5 looks bad strategically. King f6, king e5. You're like, wait a second, did I just ruin everything? And he took, and he still is going for the h-file. But I thought f5 made perfect sense. But here, the rook can also land on f5, king f4, pawn e5, things of that nature.
Well, it's a matter of time until the time decides the game. So Hikaru, he hasn't done anything totally wrong. He hasn't blundered. Maybe he missed some forced wins. But it's just two winning. e5 is coming. Hans is going to lose a bunch of pawns. You could take on d6 and rook f1. Rook f3 is winning. You could play e6. It's a menu of options for Hikaru. And he's up 2 pawns. He's up a minute. Hans is still fighting. Kudos to him. He has put on a great defensive display, but he is just getting pummeled here.
Oh.
Or is he?
Because rook f5 drops d6, rook f6 drops d5. And this actually isn't that easy. If black is able to scoop up the d-pawn, one of them, it seems like the chances to hold are much greater.
Every time we think this game is 2-3 moves away from being over, it might be 2 or 3 moves away from being over. Hans involves his other rook. Suddenly, White's king not feeling as comfortable, but it can hide away on h4. Remember that rook endgame that Hikaru saved against Firouzja? Hans is still in the game.
Yeah, it's amazing the way he's able to fight on here. But now after this rook trade, this seems easy at this stage. There are 2 separate pass pawns. The white king is active. You could take b3, but that's not going to stop the d-pawn. And Hikaru Nakamura wins. We have a 3-point lead once more. The 3-minute plus 1 second increment. Danya, you
Down the board, that's a lot of pawns to give up. And even if White gives up the knight for Black's a-pawn, that pawn avalanche as a result might be overwhelming.
Wow.
f5 by Hikaru. He wants knight c3 next.
And the knight can't get back around to protect the a4 pawn. So they don't know the evaluation. You all do, and so do we. But look at this. It's equal, but it's actually not that clear. The black king is sprinting to the center. Does White push the d-pawn? No, it keeps it in place, and suddenly White's winning.
His White's pawns are going to mobilize. King to d5. White's going to go f3 and e4, and it's Black's pawns that are further advanced. But look at this knight paralyzing them. You can't go b5. Here come White's pawns, pushing the king around like a plaything. And a g4 by Hans. Very patient. He's going to go e5 or d5 very shortly, right now.
But he might need to pick correctly, because sometimes you play e5 and the black king gets right back into the d5 square. But he can't play d5, but then the black knight gets back to c5.
So he plays neither.
Yeah, he brings his king back around. The knight is trapped. So Hikaru gives up a5, and he's hoping that he can just go after the white pawns. But I think with those double G pawns for both sides, I mean, that's one of the ugliest pawn structures you can see. White
oh my gosh.
In complete control here.
And finally, Hikaru gets one of his pawns moving. That knight is just jumping around. It has had way too much coffee. And is it finally time to push d5? No.
He goes back because, king d3. So you're giving up the g3 pawn, but the knight's trapped there. King e3 to f3.
Oh my gosh. And Hikaru might have to give up his second pawn to extricate that poor knight.
It's not getting out.
It's still not going to get out. Knight f1, king e2, knight h2. I think he should try b3. But you can just, oh my gosh.
He wants to trade off all the pawns.
Great try. I've drawn so many of these positions. You don't know which pawn to stop with which piece, and you end up losing your only pawn.
And I'm looking at Hans here.
Oh, my lands.
Oh, here's the G pawn.
And this is typical Hikaru. He's going to go g3. White's pieces are going to be tied down to stopping these passers. b3.
Oh, my
Black's
goodness.
king sliding in. It's a draw.
It's like a split in bowling, right? You just can't get them all. The knight goes to g3. The king goes back to d5. And
He blundered. Oh, no. Is it a win?
Oh, look
How
at
do
it.
you win?
Look at his face. He's really upset.
Oh, g1 queen.
G1 equals queen.
Oh, my gosh.
Hans blunders it right back, and he slaps his forehead. That game is a draw. Hikaru, he is fortunate. The crowd is going wild. But, Danya, that was a win for Hans Niemann. He should have taken that game.
I'm trying to figure out how.
The knight just hopping all over the board.
You're exactly right. It's probably a draw, but Hans can play this forever. He can jump to any part of the board, creating threats. And eventually, Hikaru is going to let the knight access a square that he wasn't supposed to let it access. Apparently, there's a win here. And apparently, Hans is about to find it. Bishop g6.
King d4.
Oh, that knight deserves a medal for what it's doing right now.
Knight f6 looks great. King d4 can also be played. And
Division of labor.
Yeah, now knight d6, c4 drops. And the white king is way too slow going after the h-pawn.
I don't know, but Hikaru's kings can kind of look like Ferraris, and...
The king is going after the h-pawn. Look at 12 seconds for black.
Knights suck.
Oh, my goodness. And he takes it. going to win. He's going to win.
He's going to promote with check.
Hikaru is going to win
Don't go
this
king
game.
g7 because that lets the knight access f5. Is
Wow.
the winning move king g6, Robert? Is it king g5?
Let's see. He's calculating. You see, look at him on screen. He is
Both
hovering.
moves win.
Both moves are winning. He plays king g6.
No.
And this is unbelievable.
No, but to go for the A pawn when it was clear that the H pawn was falling, that is just a mindless decision by Hans. He's going to lose this game, but you still have to convert this. Knight and pawn versus queen can be tricky, Robert.
But in a,
A2, he's allowed. No, A2, queen G8.
okay, so where's king b3? So the king is actually
Oh
going
my
to hide
gosh.
in enemy territory. And how do you win this now?
Well, Hikaru had a chance to put the queen on A2, and that would have completely paralyzed any further chances the black had. Now he can't get the queen A2 anymore.
So he's going to keep giving a bunch of checks. We're going to have to keep an eye on the 50-move rule if no pawns or captures are made. But the A2 threat forces him to keep giving these checks.
Hans does not deserve to lose this game, so I think he's earned a draw here. But people assume that as long as the pawn isn't on A2, it's winning. Not so fast.
Oh,
He's allowed queen A2 again! And he missed it again.
But he's still winning because his king is so close.
Oh my gosh, but how do you win this?
Queen A4,
Zig
king
and Zag,
king D3.
finally.
Oh my goodness, and Hans is just so upset with himself right here. Hikaru Nakamura steals a game from the jaws of defeat, and now the lead